My husband shattered a heavy crystal glass of aged bourbon right at my feet in front of 50 of Atlanta's most elite socialites. Useless woman, he sneered so loudly the jazz band actually stopped playing. He told everyone I was a pathetic charity case he had rescued from the projects and that I would be drowning in debt without him. What Marcus did not know was that I was a covert forensic accountant for federal agencies, and I secretly owned the very mansion he was standing in. Before I tell you how I smiled in his face while preparing to wipe out his entire financial existence, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to smile through the pain while dealing with a toxic narcissist. The rhythmic bass line of a live jazz quartet pulsed through our sprawling Buckhead estate. It was our annual end-of-summer gala, an extravagant display of wealth and status meant to impress the board of directors from Marcus's investment firm. Women dripping in borrowed diamonds and men in bespoke suits filled the grand parlor. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and roasted appetizers. From the outside, my life looked like a modern Cinderella story. Marcus constantly reminded everyone that he had met me when I was supposedly drowning in debt, working late shifts just to survive. He painted himself as the generous savior who pulled a naive girl out of the hood and gave her a life of unimaginable luxury. What he did not know was that my supposed poverty was a carefully crafted cover. I specialized in crisis risk management and forensic accounting, tracking dirty money for the most powerful people in the country. I was the person who knew where all the bodies were buried in the financial world. My marriage to Marcus was not a rescue mission. It was an assignment that had turned deeply personal. Over the years, I had watched him steal, lie, and cheat his way to the top, all while using me as a prop to boost his fragile ego. I played the part perfectly, wearing the simple beige dresses he picked out, keeping my head down, and letting him feel like a king. I was navigating through the maze of Atlanta's elite, balancing a heavy Baccarat crystal tumbler filled with Marcus's favorite aged bourbon. He had strict, absurd rules when he entertained. One of them was that his drink needed to be refreshed exactly on the hour. I had been detained in the kitchen by the catering staff, making me precisely 2 minutes late. I could see him from across the room holding court near the grand fireplace. He was wearing his tailored charcoal suit, his gold watch catching the light as he laughed loudly at a joke someone made. But the moment his eyes locked onto mine, the charismatic smile vanished, replaced by a sharp, dark sneer. I approached him, extending my hand to offer the drink. Marcus did not reach for the glass. Instead, he stepped forward and intentionally swatted his hand outward, striking my wrist with deliberate force. The heavy crystal flew from my grasp and shattered violently against the imported Italian marble floor. Amber liquid splashed across my bare calves and soaked into the hem of my silk dress. The music seemed to fade into a muffled hum as 50 wealthy guests turned their heads to stare. The silence in the massive room was deafening. "You useless woman," Marcus laughed, his voice booming. "You can't even manage the simple task of bringing me a drink on time. I guess I expect too much from someone of your background." He sneered, looking me up and down with absolute disgust. "You should remember that if I hadn't picked you out from that miserable housing project, you'd still be drowning in debt right now, probably cleaning houses for a living. I pay for the roof over your head. I buy the clothes on your back. And this is the thanks I get. You are a complete and utter embarrassment to me." He waited for the tears. He needed me to shrink so he could look tall in front of his wealthy friends. But I did not cry. I did not apologize. I stood perfectly still, my face a mask of absolute cold calm. I looked down at the ruined dress, then up at his smug, arrogant face, my eyes locking onto his sharp and unblinking. I just stared at him, letting the heavy silence stretch out. While the shattered glass lay between us, I let him bask in his false sense of power, completely unaware that his perfect world was built on a foundation of lies that I controlled. Before the suffocating quiet could stretch any further, the sharp, rhythmic clicking of designer heels broke the tension. The crowd parted like the Red Sea to make way for my sister-in-law, Chloe, the wife of Marcus's older brother, Trey. She glided across the room in a pale pink silk gown, looking desperately concerned. Chloe was a woman who wore her southern hospitality like a loaded weapon. As a wealthy white woman who had married into a prominent black family, she constantly performed a highly curated version of allyship. She attended all the right charity galas and posted the right social justice quotes, but behind closed doors, her prejudice was suffocating. Chloe's face was a masterclass in manufactured pity. She gasped, bringing a perfectly manicured hand to her chest as she surveyed the shattered crystal. Instead of offering me a real towel, she zeroed in on the narrative Marcus had just established. She crouched down, careful not to let her expensive skirt touch the spilled bourbon, and pulled a single cheap paper cocktail napkin from a nearby tray. With exaggerated gentle motions, she began to dab at the hem of my ruined dress. "Oh, Marcus, honey, you have to be understanding," she cooed, her voice pitched loud enough for every guest to hear. "You can't be so harsh with her." She looked up at me with eyes full of fake sympathy. "You have to remember where Naomi comes from. In the neighborhood she grew up in, people probably only drink from cheap plastic cups. How on earth would she know how to properly handle a heavy baccarat crystal glass? Poor thing. It must be so exhausting for her trying to fit in here. I keep telling you, Marcus, you really should just listen to Trey and me. We can loan you some money to hire a professional maid. That way Naomi doesn't have to strain herself trying to blend in with your colleagues. It's simply not fair to expect her to know our ways." The microaggression was executed with surgical precision. I glanced over her shoulder and saw Trey standing a few feet away, swirling the ice in his drink, saying nothing. That was the dynamic of this family. They fed off each other's cruelty. What Chloe did not know was the exact state of their supposedly untouchable trust fund. As the forensic accountant monitoring the shadow ledgers of Marcus's holding company, I knew exactly where Trey had been investing her family money. He had poured every liquid asset they possessed into Marcus's offshore shell corporations. They were drowning in phantom equity built on fraudulent tax returns and illegal wire transfers. Chloe was crouching on the floor, insulting my background, while I held the digital keys that could freeze her entire net worth with a single keystroke. She was a beggar, insulting the bank vault. I looked down at her fake, sympathetic smile. Slowly, gracefully, I bent my knees and crouched down right in front of her. I reached past her perfectly manicured hand and picked up the largest, sharpest piece of the broken crystal. The edges were jagged and dangerous. I held it up between my thumb and forefinger, letting the multifaceted surface glimmer. I could see their reflections, warped and distorted, grotesque caricatures of themselves. A slow, quiet smile spread across my face. It was not a smile of submission. It was a smile of absolute, terrifying clarity. I saw Chloe's eyes widen slightly. She expected to see a broken woman fighting back tears, but she found only cold, hard ice. I dropped the jagged piece of crystal back into the puddle of bourbon, letting it splash softly. I stood up, smoothing the front of my ruined silk dress. I did not say a single word to Chloe. I locked eyes with Marcus one last time, letting him see the complete lack of fear in my expression. Then I turned my back on both of them and walked through the silent crowd, my head held high. The guests parted for me as I glided through the grand parlor, leaving Marcus and Chloe standing in their own toxic mess. I headed straight for the heavy mahogany doors of the foyer, ready to leave the charade behind forever. But before I could reach the sanctuary of the front entrance, another figure stepped directly into my path, Vivian, my mother-in-law. Vivian was the first lady of the largest megachurch in Atlanta, a woman who preached grace on Sunday mornings but practiced ruthless elitism every other day of the week. She was impeccably dressed in a tailored emerald suit draped in heavy pearls. She viewed me as a permanent stain on her family's pristine image. She looked me up and down, her gaze lingering on the bourbon-soaked hem of my dress. "Look at you," she whispered, her voice a harsh hiss. "A walking disaster. I told my son 1,000 times he should have married the daughter of the federal judge. She understood pedigree. Instead, he brought home a charity case with no parents, no connections, and clearly no class. You are forbidden from stepping foot in the main dining room tonight. Go out through the servant entrance and clean yourself up. You bring nothing but shame to the life we have built." But looking at her, I felt a profound sense of closure. They were all rotten to the core. I gave Vivian a slight mocking bow of my head. "Enjoy your evening, Vivian," I said softly. "It will be a night you never forget." I sidestepped the older woman and pushed open the massive front doors. The valet brought my car around immediately. I slid into the driver's seat of my sleek black sedan, and the heavy doors of the mansion slammed shut behind me. I put the car in park and reached under the driver's seat, pressing my fingers against a hidden magnetic latch. A small compartment dropped open, revealing a secondary, highly encrypted smartphone Marcus had no idea existed. I powered it on, the biometric scanner, recognizing my fingerprint instantly. I opened a secure messaging app. For 3 years, I had gathered the evidence. I had mapped out every illegal wire transfer, every bribe, and every hidden offshore account connected to Marcus and his family. I looked through the windshield at the warm glow of the mansion lights. I smiled and typed a single, decisive message to my covert team at the agency. It is time. Initiate Order 404. Freeze their entire system. I hit send. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and shifted the car into drive, accelerating down the sweeping driveway. As my car sped away, leaving the estate in the rearview mirror, I knew exactly what was about to happen. By midnight, their bank accounts would be locked. By morning, federal agents would be seizing their assets. I left the ticking time bomb behind me, driving into the night as the ultimate architect of their destruction. The harsh mechanical buzzing of a cell phone vibrated violently against the polished mahogany nightstand. It was exactly 6 a.m. Marcus groaned, his head throbbing. He blindly reached out his fingers, closing around the cold metal frame of his phone. He squinted against the blinding glare of the screen. His blurred vision slowly focused on a cascading waterfall of red notification banners. The first message was an automated alert from his primary domestic bank. Account frozen. Please contact your branch administrator immediately. Marcus blinked hard. He swiped to the next notification, this one, from his exclusive offshore wealth management firm. The message was identical. Account suspended pending compliance review. His heart began to hammer against his ribs. He sat up abruptly, his fingers flying across the screen, frantically tapping the banking app he used to monitor his liquid assets. Access denied. Panic, raw and visceral, began to claw at his throat. He opened his encrypted email server. A message marked with highest urgency sat at the top of his inbox. It was from the chairman of the board of his investment firm. Effective immediately. You are suspended from all duties and stripped of your executive authority. The board has been alerted to massive irregularities in your portfolio. Federal authorities have contacted our compliance division regarding alleged wire fraud and illegal shell corporations tied directly to your signature. Furthermore, Vanguard Holdings has initiated a catastrophic withdrawal of all their assets from our firm. Do not attempt to access the building. The phone slipped from his trembling hand. Vanguard Holdings was his anchor client. Without their capital, his phantom equity would collapse. He threw off the covers and bolted out of bed, tearing out of the master's suite wearing nothing but expensive silk boxers. He stormed into the main living room, his eyes wild and bloodshot. I was already there, sitting on the plush velvet sofa, bathed in the soft morning light, holding a steaming mug of black coffee. I looked the picture of absolute serenity. Marcus stopped dead in his tracks. He stared at me, his chest rising and falling in ragged, uneven gasps. But Marcus was a narcissist. His brain could not process personal failure. His terror rapidly mutated into blazing, irrational fury. "You did this," he snarled, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You brought this curse into my house." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee. "I should never have let you show your face last night," he shouted, pacing like a caged animal. "You are a jinx. You humiliated me in front of the board. You made me look weak. And now this." He dragged both hands through his perfectly styled hair. "I need cash," he demanded, stopping abruptly and glaring down at me. "Everything is locked. Some glitch. I just need a bridge loan to hold me over. Did you hear me, you useless parasite?" he roared. "I need money. Call those pathetic friends of yours. Max out those garbage credit cards you had before I rescued you. I need $50,000 in cash by noon to pay off the retainers for my lawyers, or we are going to lose everything." The irony was delicious. "You are going to lose everything," I repeated softly, emphasizing the pronoun. "We," he corrected viciously. slamming his fist down on the glass coffee table. "We are going to lose this house. If you don't get off your lazy behind and find me some cash right now, you are going straight back to the gutter where I found you." I set my coffee mug down. I leaned back against the velvet cushions and crossed my legs. I let the silence stretch out, watching the sweat bead on his forehead. I was simply going to sit there and watch the first waves of his personal apocalypse wash over him, enjoying every single second of the view. "Are you deaf?" he screamed, his voice cracking. "I need cash!" He marched over to the side table, snatched his designer leather wallet, and ripped it open. He produced his prized black titanium American Express card, hurling the heavy metal card directly at my face. It missed my cheek by an inch, clattering onto the coffee table. "Call your pathetic friends," Marcus commanded. "Get me $50,000 by noon, or we are entirely finished." I looked down at the black card, then back up at my husband. He looked absolutely pathetic. I picked up the titanium card, turning it over in my hands. "You actually think this is a glitch?" I said, my voice quiet completely, even and utterly devoid of the submissive drawl I had used for the last 3 years. The sudden change in my cadence made him freeze. "What did you say?" he demanded. I looked him dead in the eyes. "You think your card is malfunctioning, Marcus. You think Vanguard Holdings pulled their capital because of some clerical error. You think the board suspended you this morning because of a random audit." The color began to drain from his face. The fact that I knew about Vanguard, the fact that I knew about his suspension before he had spoken a word about it, hit him like a physical blow. "How do you know about Vanguard?" he whispered. "Your accounts aren't frozen because of a glitch, Marcus. They're frozen because they are entirely empty," I explained. "In fact, your accounts have been deep in the red for exactly 3 years. You haven't been a millionaire, let alone a billionaire, since that week in Las Vegas." Marcus stopped breathing. 3 years ago, he had taken a supposed business trip to Nevada. In reality, he had locked himself in a high-roller suite at the Bellagio and lost $7 million in 4 days embezzling client funds to cover his tracks. Then, miraculously, an anonymous offshore trust had acquired his bad debt, and an algorithmic trading bot had started generating massive returns, filling the crater he had dug. He never questioned it. He convinced himself he was a financial genius. "How do you know about Vegas?" he asked, his voice shaking. "No one knows about that. I fixed it." "You didn't fix anything," I said, a cold, sharp smile touching my mouth. "You were drowning Marcus. The person who quietly pumped $50,000 a month into your personal accounts so you could continue playing the billionaire was me." He stared, his brain violently rejecting the information. "That's impossible," he stammered. "You didn't have a dime when I met you. I rescued you." "You rescued a ghost," I corrected him smoothly. "The woman you met 3 years ago did not exist. My financial ruin was a fabricated background created by the federal agency I actually work for. I needed a way inside your inner circle to map the illegal wire transfers you and your brother Trey were running. So I created a profile you couldn't resist, a poor, uneducated, beautiful woman you could easily control." I stood up from the sofa, towering over him in that moment. "Every single dime you have spent for the last 36 months came from my operational budget," I told him, my voice low and lethal. "The bespoke suits your mother's diamond necklace, the very bourbon you wasted by throwing that glass at my feet. It was all funded by the charity case you love to humiliate. I bought this house through a shell corporation before you even proposed to me. You have been living on my charity, Marcus. You are the ultimate freeloader." The devastation on his face was a masterpiece. His entire identity was annihilated. "Last night you called me useless." I continued, circling him like a predator. "You told 50 people I'd be drowning in debt without you. But the truth is, without me, you would have been in a federal prison cell 3 years ago. I kept you afloat just long enough to trace every single dirty dollar you and your family ever touched. And now that I have everything I need, I am turning off the tap. Order 404 is a complete asset seizure. The federal agents are currently raiding your brother's house. Your mother's church accounts have been frozen. You don't have $50,000, Marcus. You don't even have 50 cents. He could not accept the humiliation. The terror in his eyes vanished, replaced by a sudden violent surge of pure animalistic rage. He let out a guttural roar and lunged directly at my throat. Years of intense tactical training had hardwired my reflexes. As his hands reached for my neck, I didn't flinch. I simply shifted my weight, stepping smoothly to the left while catching his extended right wrist. Using his own aggressive forward momentum against him, I pivoted sharply and twisted his arm downward in a seamless, fluid motion. He crashed violently onto the heavy glass coffee table, shattering it completely before tumbling onto the Persian rug in a pathetic heap. I stood over him, smoothing a microscopic wrinkle from my cashmere sweater. Blood trickled down his jaw from a small cut. He looked up at me, the blind rage in his eyes now fractured by physical reality. He realized for the first time that I was not the fragile, defenseless woman he'd spent 3 years breaking down. "Get out!" he screamed, trying desperately to reclaim his dominance. "Get out of my house right now. This is my property. My name is on the deed. I am calling the police." I walked gracefully over to my leather tote bag and pulled out a thick, legal-sized manila envelope. I dropped it right onto his lap. "Read it carefully, Marcus." He tore open the flap and pulled out the thick stack of legal documents. His bloodshot eyes darted across the bold print. "This is the deed to the estate," he muttered. "It says the property was transferred to Apex Investment Group." "Exactly," I replied. "Do you remember 3 years ago when you were terrified of that SEC audit? You panicked and transferred the title of this mansion into a blind trust, a corporate shell. You signed the documents without ever bothering to properly vet the holding company. You thought you were outsmarting the system." He stared at the paper, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. "Apex Investment Group," I continued. "It's a highly secure private holding firm based out of Delaware. And guess who the sole anonymous chief executive officer of Apex Investment Group is?" The remaining blood drained from his face. "You," he whispered. "Me," I confirmed. "You own absolutely nothing, Marcus. You are just a pathetic tenant residing in your wife's property, and frankly, you are 3 years late on rent." He dropped the documents. "You tricked me," he gasped. "This is fraud. I will take you to court." "With what lawyers, Marcus?" I asked, tilting my head in mock sympathy. "The ones you can no longer afford. You signed this deed willingly. It was the only smart financial decision you have made in your entire pathetic life." Suddenly, his entire demeanor shifted. He dropped to his knees, ignoring the sharp fragments of glass. "Naomi, please," he begged, his voice cracking into a high-pitched, pathetic whine. "You can't do this to me. I'm your husband. We are family." "You gave me a cover story," I corrected, stepping back, "and a front-row seat to the most arrogant, corrupt family in Atlanta. I can change," he pleaded, tears of terror spilling down his cheeks. "We can sell the house, take the cash, and leave the country together. Just don't leave me here to take the fall alone." I looked down at him with profound disgust. "You are missing the point, Marcus," I said, my voice a harsh whisper. "I am not here to run away with you. I am not your partner, and I am certainly not your savior. I am the architect of your ruin." Before he could offer another pathetic plea, the heavy oak front doors echoed with a series of sharp, authoritative knocks. The feds were not just coming, they were already here. The heavy oak front doors flew open violently. It wasn't the FBI. It was Vivian. She stormed through the grand entryway like an avenging angel in a pristine white Chanel suit, her hair sprayed into an unmovable helmet. Her chest was heaving, her eyes wide with frantic manic energy. She marched into the living room and stopped dead, taking in the scene. Her golden boy, her perfect son, kneeling in his silk boxers, bleeding and defeated. "Marcus!" Vivian shrieked, dropping to her knees. She grabbed his face. "What happened to you? What has she done to you?" "Mom, it's gone." He trembled. "Everything is gone. The firm, the offshore accounts. The feds are coming. She owns the house. Mom, she owns Apex. She took everything." Vivian turned her head slowly, her gaze locking onto me with pure, unadulterated venom. "You classless, violent thug," she spat. "I knew the moment Marcus brought you home that you would try to destroy us. You are nothing but a gold-digging parasite." She puffed out her chest. "We are the Jenkins family. We are built on a foundation of divine grace and generational success. We are untouchable." She unclasped her crocodile handbag, pulled out a sleek leather checkbook, and hastily scribbled across the paper. She ripped the check from the binding and threw it at my chest. "There's $100,000, Vivian announced. "Take it and walk out that door. You are going to sign whatever divorce papers my lawyers put in front of you and crawl back to whatever miserable, poverty-stricken hole you crawled out of. And if you even think about arguing, I am calling the senior legal counsel for our church. We will tie you up in court for the rest of your natural life." I did not look at the check. I simply reached into the pocket of my sweater and pulled out my encrypted smartphone. "Do you honestly think $100,000 can save him, Vivian?" I asked softly. "Do you really believe that $100,000 embezzled directly from the Church Youth Charity Fund is going to make the federal government look the other way?" Vivian froze. The righteous indignation melted off her face. "What did you just say?" she asked. I tapped the screen of my phone and pressed play. The crisp, clear audio of a recorded telephone conversation filled the room. It was Vivian's voice, completely unmistakable, speaking to her bank manager. "Yes, redirect the $30,000 from the weekend tithe collection into Apex Consulting LLC. Label it as a pastoral outreach expense. And make sure the building fund for the new orphanage is diverted into the offshore account by Friday." I paused the recording. The silence was deafening. I reached into my tote bag and pulled out a thick blue binder. "This is a complete forensic audit of your megachurch's financial history for the last 5 years, Vivian. You've been bleeding your own congregation dry. You skimmed millions from the Youth Center Building Fund. You took donations meant for disaster relief and funneled them into private shadow accounts. You stole from orphans. Vivian, you are nothing but a common thief hiding behind a cross. And that check you just threw at me, it's drawn from an account that was flagged by the FBI Cybercrimes Division at 4 o'clock this morning. The federal task force executing Order 404 is not just coming for Marcus. They are coming for the entire Jenkins operation. They are currently staging at the bottom of your driveway." The pristine, arrogant facade that Vivian had maintained for decades shattered. Her knees buckled and she collapsed onto the floor right next to her broken son. The wail of sirens grew louder just as the heavy mahogany doors were thrown wide open again. Trey burst into the parlor with his wife Chloe right behind him. Trey was still in his silk pajama pants, his face pale and slick with sweat. But Chloe was in pristine white tennis apparel, looking as though she had just stepped off the cover of a country club brochure. She stopped and gasped at the carnage, her gaze finally snapping to me. She assumed I had finally suffered a complete mental breakdown. "Oh my God, Naomi," she breathed, her voice dripping with that sickeningly sweet Southern condescension. "Look at what you've done. You've completely lost your mind." Trey ignored me, rushing to his mother. "Mom, what is happening? The bank just called me. My routing numbers are dead. The church accounts are locked." Vivian just sobbed, pointing a trembling finger at me. Chloe stepped carefully over the debris, her white tennis shoes avoiding the blood and bourbon. "Naomi, sweetie, you need to stop this right now," she said, using the lilting tone of a preschool teacher. "I know you're upset. I know Marcus is filing for divorce, but destroying their beautiful home is not the answer." The red and blue lights of federal vehicles were already reflecting against the curtains. "You have always been so emotionally unstable," Chloe continued, deliberately flashing the massive diamond ring on her finger. "Trey bought this for me just yesterday to celebrate closing the new commercial property in Buckhead. That's what a healthy, stable marriage looks like, Naomi. But because I am a Christian woman, I am willing to offer you a lifeline. If you drop to your knees right now and apologize and promise to sign a clean annulment, I will personally make sure they don't press criminal charges. And because I know you'll have absolutely nothing, I'll give you a job. My lead housekeeper just quit. You can come clean for me, Naomi. I'll pay you minimum wage under the table. It will give you a sense of honest purpose." I looked at her pristine white tennis skirt. I looked at the massive diamond ring. "You want me to clean your house?" I asked, a razor-sharp smile forming. "It's honest work," she insisted. "Chloe," I said, my voice slicing through the heavy air, "I am not going to clean your house. And the reason I'm not going to clean your house is because by this time tomorrow, you are not going to have a house." Her sympathetic smile froze. I reached into my tote bag and pulled out a second folder, tossing it in front of her. That is a copy of the federal indictment bearing your husband's signature. Trey has been using the church youth charities to launder money for a cartel operating out of Miami. Every single cent he used to buy that Buckhead property was dirty. Every dime he spent on those designer tennis skirts was stolen. And that 5-carat diamond ring you just shoved in my face, that ring was purchased with funds diverted from a pediatric cancer charity. You are wearing stolen charity money on your finger, Chloe. She gasped, pulling her hand behind her back as if the ring had caught fire. She looked frantically at Trey. Trey, tell her she is lying. But Trey couldn't look at her. He was staring at the front windows as federal agents in tactical gear poured out of black SUVs. We are ruined, Chloe, he whispered, his voice breaking. She gave them everything. The ledgers, the routing numbers, the encrypted emails. She gave the feds everything. Chloe stumbled backward. The country club memberships, the luxury vacations, the sense of social superiority, all of it vanished. You can't do this, she stammered. We are good people. We go to church. You are a parasite, Chloe, I said, throwing her insult back at her. You have lived your entire life feeding off the misery and exploitation of others. I took a step closer. So keep the ring, Chloe, I whispered, just as heavy fists pounded on the mahogany front doors. You are going to need it to pay for a decent defense attorney, because when the FBI is done seizing your assets, you won't even have enough money to buy a mop. And the heavy oak doors of the foyer burst open with a deafening crash. FBI, nobody move, keep your hands where we can see them. A dozen heavily armed federal agents flooded into the grand parlor. Chloe let out a piercing shriek and dropped to her knees beside her husband and her mother-in-law. The three of them huddled together on the floor, a pathetic portrait of fallen aristocracy. They were weeping, trembling, and utterly powerless. I stepped back smoothly, blending into the shadows near the grand fireplace as the swarm of agents surrounded the Jenkins family. My work here was finally done. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a dark windbreaker stepped through the formation. Agent Miller, he said, giving me a firm, respectful nod. The perimeter is fully secured. The primary targets are detained. Your operational cover is officially terminated. Excellent work, Naomi. The sound of my real title hit the room like a shockwave. The four members of the Jenkins family snapped their heads toward me, their expressions contorting from terror to absolute mind-bending shock. You, Chloe whispered, her voice trembling. You're one of them. You set us up. But even as her husband was being read his Miranda rights, Chloe could not let go of her twisted delusion. You are a monster, she hissed, tears of fury streaming down her face. I offered you grace. I offered you a job cleaning my home. You are just jealous of my wealth. Clean your house, Chloe, I asked, my voice a lethal calm. How exactly were you planning to pay me? With the startup fund your husband manages. Yes, she spat, because my husband is a brilliant provider. A humorless laugh escaped me. He is a brilliant provider, Chloe, but he's not providing for you. Are you unaware that Trey drained that entire fund to finance his 22-year-old mistress in Miami? Trey's head snapped toward me. Shut up, he yelled, but an agent pushed him back down. I reached into my tote bag and tossed a thick stack of folded documents into Chloe's lap. Those are the shadow credit card statements your brilliant husband has been hiding. He bought her a luxury condo in South Beach. He bought her a new Range Rover. He spent $40,000 on her shopping sprees in Milan while you were at the country club bragging about your perfect marriage. He washed cartel money to fund your lifestyle, and he stole from the church to fund hers. Chloe's hands shook as she picked up the papers. The highlighted line items, the charges from luxury jewelers in Florida, the first-class airline tickets. The denial that had shielded her for years finally shattered. A guttural, inhuman scream erupted from her throat. She threw the bank statements into the air and lunged at Trey, her manicured nails curling into claws. You disgusting, pathetic liar, she shrieked, tearing at his face. I gave you everything you were spending my money on some cheap Miami trash. Get off me, you crazy witch, Trey roared, shoving her hard. You spent $60,000 a month on clothes. You drained my legitimate accounts dry. I had to take loans from the cartel just to keep you swimming in champagne. You drove me to this. The brawl ignited a chain reaction of venomous hatred. The illusion of family loyalty evaporated. Marcus turned his blazing eyes on his mother. "And what about you?" he screamed. "You sat on $10 million of stolen church funds while I was facing prison. I begged you for a loan, and you told me to pray about it. You could have saved me." Vivian's face twisted into a mask of ugly, self-righteous fury. "Do not you dare blame your incompetence on me, Marcus Jenkins. I built an empire. You lost $7 million on blackjack and cheap liquor. You are a degenerate. You deserve to rot in a cell for dragging my good name into the mud." I crossed my arms and leaned against the wall. The federal agents did not intervene. They simply stood forming a silent wall around the feral scene, letting the family completely devour itself. They were tearing each other apart, limb by limb, consumed by their own greed, arrogance, and cowardice. My heart beat with a slow, steady rhythm of total satisfaction. The true punishment was not the handcuffs. It was this exact moment, the absolute, irreversible destruction of their false reality. The sweet, flawless symphony of my revenge was finally complete. It took 6 hours for their ruthless defense attorneys to secure a temporary release on bail. By 8 o'clock that evening, they were attempting the most desperate masquerade of their lives at the annual Atlanta Elite fundraising gala, the crown jewel of the Southern social calendar. They had not come to donate. They had come to beg. They needed a lifeline. Vivian spotted their target. "Straighten your spine, Marcus," she hissed. "There is Arthur Sterling. He's the chairman of the City Investment Committee. We are the Jenkins family. We are simply offering him an exclusive opportunity." They marched across the ballroom. Arthur Sterling was a formidable man with silver hair and cold, calculating eyes. "Arthur," Vivian purred, "it's so wonderful to see you." "Vivian Marcus." Arthur said, his tone carefully neutral. "I was not expecting to see you here tonight. I heard there was some commotion at your estate." Marcus let out a sharp, artificial laugh. "A complete misunderstanding, Arthur. In fact, I have a highly lucrative commercial portfolio opening up. I'm offering you the ground floor." "You want me to authorize a city investment fund into your portfolio tonight, Marcus?" Arthur said, his eyes narrowing. "That's highly irregular." "We just need a bridge loan, Arthur," Vivian insisted. $5 million to clear some administrative hurdles." "You want to leverage your congregation's tithes to secure a municipal loan." Vivian. Arthur's expression hardened. "I think this conversation is over." Before he could turn away, the music abruptly cut off. The chandeliers dimmed. A single brilliant white spotlight pierced the darkness, snapping to the top of the grand marble staircase. A tall, imposing figure stepped into the light. It was me. I stood at the top of the stairs, draped in a custom-tailored crimson silk gown that swept the floor with undeniable authority. My posture radiated the cold, absolute power of a woman who held the entire room in the palm of her hand. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. I could see the exact moment Marcus and Vivian spotted me. The master of ceremonies' voice boomed through the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special adjustment to tonight's program. We would like to introduce the evening's anonymous primary benefactor. Please welcome the new majority shareholder and chief executive officer of Apex Investment Group, Miss Naomi Jenkins." The applause was thunderous. They were clapping for the very wealth and power Marcus and Vivian were trying to fake. I began my descent, and my eyes locked entirely on them. The crowd naturally parted as I reached the ballroom floor. I stopped 3 feet away. "Naomi?" Marcus choked. "What are you doing here?" I smiled. It was not a kind smile. "I bought the table, Marcus," I replied, my voice carrying clearly. "In fact, I bought the entire VIP section. It's amazing what you can afford when you're not actively laundering money for a cartel." Vivian's face twisted into a mask of pure rage. "You evil, vindictive snake," she hissed. "I will tell everyone in this room you are a federal rat." "Please do, Vivian," I challenged. "Tell them. Tell Arthur Sterling that I'm the federal agent who seized your bank accounts this morning. Tell him the only reason you're standing in this ballroom right now is because you liquidated your last hidden retirement fund just to post bail." "You're out on federal bail," Arthur demanded, his voice rising in outrage. "You approached me for a municipal loan while you are under federal indictment." "It's a setup," Marcus begged. "She framed us." "Miss Jenkins," Arthur said respectfully, turning to me, "is this true?" "It is entirely true, Mr. Sterling," I answered, not breaking eye contact with Marcus. "The only thing they have left to their name is the rented tuxedo he is currently wearing." The whispers erupted. The social execution was happening in real time. "Why are you doing this?" Marcus whimpered, tears filling his eyes. "You already took the house. You took the firm. What more do you want?" "I want you to feel exactly what it is like to be entirely powerless," I whispered. "I want you to look around this room and realize that you are nothing. You are a fraud, Marcus, and the show is finally over." As if on cue, the grand double doors at the top of the staircase swung open once more. A synchronized team of 6 elite corporate attorneys in immaculate midnight blue suits descended the steps, forming a flawless, intimidating wall of legal armor directly behind me. Arthur Sterling himself stepped out from the circle of stunned executives. He approached me, buttoned his tailored jacket, and offered a deep, respectful bow. The collective gasp from the surrounding elite was so sharp it sucked the oxygen from the room. Arthur took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his gaze sweeping the audience before locking onto Marcus, "it is my distinct honor to clarify the guest list. You are not just looking at the CEO of Apex Investment Group. Please show your utmost respect for Naomi Jenkins, the senior managing partner of the Federal Forensic Accounting Syndicate." Así inicia a fe. A shockwave rippled through the crowd. "And to be completely transparent," Arthur continued, a sharp, merciless smile cutting across his face, "she is the woman who, as of 3 o'clock this afternoon, personally orchestrated the hostile takeover and absolute liquidation of the Jenkins corporate portfolio. She now legally owns every single remaining fraction of Marcus Jenkins's debt." Marcus's hand gripping a crystal flute of red wine went numb. The heavy crystal slipped from his grasp and shattered on the polished marble floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot. He stared down at the broken glass, his mind finally breaking. I had not just frozen his accounts, I had bought his entire existence. I was his judge, his jury, and his absolute financial executioner. Vivian clutched her chest, her knees buckling. I opened a thick, leather-bound folder. As of this exact moment, a comprehensive forensic audit of all Jenkins family holdings is actively underway. Marcus, your position within any corporate entity absorbed by Apex Investment Group is terminated immediately. I turned my gaze to Vivian. And as for your divine generational wealth, Vivian, the church board held an emergency session 20 minutes ago. They did not need a subpoena. They only needed the comprehensive digital dossier of your offshore wire transfers, which my team generously emailed to every single registered parishioner. "You sent my private financial records to the congregation," she wailed. "They are not your private records, Vivian. They are stolen charity funds," I corrected sharply. "You have been officially stripped of your church membership. You are just a common thief." Just then, the ballroom doors swung open. A team of federal agents walked in. At the center of the formation, looking utterly defeated and already wearing heavy steel handcuffs, was Trey. "Marcus Jenkins," the lead agent announced. "Your temporary bail is officially revoked. Place your hands behind your back." The sharp metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the Biltmore Hotel. From the back of the crowd, Chloe pushed her way through. She took one look at her husband in chains and her brother-in-law being hauled away, and her entire delusion shattered. Chloe's knees buckled. She collapsed onto the cold marble floor, weeping with loud, ugly, uncontrollable sobs. Her manicured hands covered her face in total, absolute humiliation. The elite society of Atlanta watched in stunned silence as Marcus and Trey were marched out of the grand ballroom in matching federal chains. Vivian stood frozen, staring blankly at the shattered glass, while Chloe continued to weep pitifully at my feet. The invincible empire they had built on lies, greed, and stolen money had been completely eradicated, and I was the one holding the match. The deafening echoes of federal handcuffs and Chloe's pathetic sobbing slowly faded, dissolving into the pristine silence of my present reality. I closed the final case file on my mahogany desk and let out a long, steady breath. The Jenkins family was finally gone. Marcus and Trey were navigating the brutal reality of a 20-year federal prison sentence. Vivian was a social pariah, living in a cramped one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town, excommunicated from the congregation she had ruthlessly exploited. Chloe had filed for a rapid, messy divorce the moment the asset freezes were made permanent. I pushed my chair back and stood up. The air in my penthouse was cool and still. I walked across the expansive living room to the massive floor-to-ceiling windows that wrapped around the entire top floor. Below me, the glittering skyline of Atlanta stretched out endlessly. I pressed my palm against the cool glass, looking down at the very streets where the Jenkins family once thought they ruled as untouchable royalty. Their arrogance was their undoing. Their refusal to see the quiet, observant woman standing in the shadows had been the fatal flaw in their design. They thought my silence was submission. They mistook my composure for cowardice. They fundamentally failed to understand a basic lethal truth about survival. When a woman is pushed to the wall, she does not cry. She calculates. She memorizes the blueprints of your empire. She tracks every hidden account. And she waits patiently for the perfect moment to strike. I watched my own reflection in the glass superimposed over the brilliant city lights. There were no traces of the frightened informant left in my eyes, only the calm, unwavering gaze of a woman who had meticulously dismantled her abusers and claimed her own absolute freedom. The heavy chains of their manipulation were broken forever. As the perspective slowly pulled back, drifting seamlessly through the glass and out into the cool night air, it captured a single, flawless image. I was standing at the absolute pinnacle of the city, completely at peace, surrounded by the wealth I had built with my own brilliant mind and wonderfully perfectly free.